We've seen that, what's going on? What's the bottom line here? We've seen that we've resulted in increased capacity through Gerald Ford. We've seen that our average domestic fare has come down relative to the national numbers. We've seen that this one I found quite interesting, by the way. If you go back to 2008, this represents our competitive position, competitive posture as a percentage versus Chicago and Detroit, two major drive-out markets that, by the way, it's okay, it's all right, you can answer this. Who's driven to Chicago or Detroit because it was just simply too high priced? Yeah, see, it's way too many of you. That's what we're trying to change, not because it's bad, but because we want to make it in your self-interest to drive more close, drive to a friendly airport where you can park for close, where people will treat you nice, and a whole bunch of stuff that they don't do in Chicago and Detroit. So, but here's why you did it. I mean, this just explains the rationality of your behavior. If you look at 2008, you can see we were at 140 to 145% on average ticket price. Now, the averages are averages. You're still going to be able to find great deals here and there, and if you search around, you may find a better deal somewhere else, and we understand that. But got to play. We just have to look at the averages. But our average was way out of line. That's why you drove. That's why you were driving, and those numbers were just simply too high. We've now driven those down, in the case of Detroit, down to less than 10% differential, in Chicago about 20%. We had it down a little bit lower in Chicago. We've got work to do in that area to put ourselves in an even stronger competitive position vis-a-vis Chicago. Quarterly employments at Gerald Ford continue now to be increasing. This talks about what the average fare and employments and what's happened to us. Even though the average fare has in fact gone up at Gerald Ford, it's gone up far less than the rest of the country. And so we've seen, as I say, a repricing, and you saw that very clearly, I think, in the Chicago and Detroit comparison. So we look at, we do measure ourselves, as you can see, and what's happening around the rest of the country. All of what we've seen in terms of increases in employments, et cetera. Scheduled departing seats nationally or at major airports has been essentially flat over the same time frame that we've been operating. Quarterly departing seats in the United States nationally has been essentially flat over the time period that we've seen the increase. Average domestic airfares have continued to increase as a consequence of fuel prices primarily, both at the major airports as well as nationally. Quarterly employments continue to be flat at the major airports as well as nationally. And so here, what we've been able to do at Gerald Ford is to change the game. Despite the national environment being flat, we've been able to change the game to create a more competitive environment, reduce the cost of flying. And so what's my bottom line? There's still more work to do, but the bottom line is we want you to think about flying Gerald Ford first. There's a couple of reasons. Well, let me talk about this one in a minute first, and then I'll give the wrap up. You see what's happened, though, as I was speaking of how, and again, I'm just reporting the facts, not anything other here. But you see what happened, Gerald Ford has now separated a bit from the fare structures, the average fare structures at Lansing, Traverse City, and Kalamazoo. And so Gerald Ford has stepped into a different competitive set. So the same thing that was happening to us, smaller market, less volume, is now happening in those markets. And so they're going to have to make a decision. Consumers in those markets have to make a decision if they're willing to pay the premium to continue to fly out of their local marketplace. If that meets their needs, that's great. That's a wonderful thing, and we encourage that, and we've tried to help them to gain service where we could help them to be, by our regional airlines being supportive. But we've seen that we've stepped into a different group, and that our average fares have experienced a decline. So there is a separation, and consumers have choices. They're going to have choices. Are they better off flying out of Traverse City, or is Grand Rapids offering a better service depending on where they live in the community? This is the result of what we believe has happened. We call it a ticket tax. Ticket tax was basically the calculated premium of average fare, looking at the number of tickets that are purchased out of Gerald Ford Airport. So this is a relatively conservative number. It's a theoretical number. It just uses averages, multiplies them out. But essentially, we estimate that the Regional Air Alliance, on average, if all of the averages played out and all the arithmetic were to be this way, that benefit of the economic impact of this effort in the West Michigan community has been nearly $45 million per year in savings that we have experienced as compared to what we would be in if we continued to be priced above the national averages. So given the fact that we've invested in this effort about $5 million, we've been able to achieve a $45 million annual return. That works for me. I don't know if that works for you. I'd like to get a few more of those if I could find other opportunities. This is why I want to ask you to a couple of things. One is look at Ford first, especially for your business travel, but certainly for your personal travel as well. This is a vote of confidence in the West Michigan community. This is a way that you can, your travel is the way that we are able to then bring additional service to the community. They are economically motivated. If you're traveling through Gerald Ford, you're casting a vote in favor of additional service through Gerald Ford into West Michigan. If you arrive to Chicago, you're casting a vote in favor of that. Now you have to make that decision as a consumer, but I just want to introduce to you the concept that there is value. There's value to your time that you don't have to drive. There's value in your gas that you don't have to burn to drive out of the market. And there's value to putting a vote in favor of increasing and expanding airline service into West Michigan. And so think about the total cost of going somewhere else, please, before you make your travel decision and push the buy button on your computer. This is the kinds of savings we've been able to get because folks have come together and they've acted in their own interest and they've taken maybe a little more of a community view to what do we need to do to try to encourage more service and expanded service. And these are the results. Plus, you can go a lot more places direct out of Grand Rapids and Kent County and Gerald Ford than you ever could in the past. So, by the way, the second thing I want to ask you is if you really think this is a good idea and you're a company that, travels a lot and you'd like to share some of that dividend with us, we'd be happy to, grateful to accept your check. We are a 501c3 and you always have to conclude by asking the question, if you have been a beneficiary of this and would like to share a bit of your savings with us, we would gratefully accept it. And we have just a little, suggested sharing formula. You might call it tithing. You can call it anything you like. But if you had a little extra savings you want to share, we would in fact, in all seriousness, be grateful. We still have a few more bucks we need to put together to finish this initiative up. It's been fun to be a part of it. I hope that this has given you a different view of airline service, the industry, and what's happening in West Michigan, and how, if we work together regionally and we put aside some historic boundaries, we think about the way things are going to be in the future and not the way they were in the past, we can make enormous progress. Thanks very much, Jane. Thank you all for your time.